Hello.
Hello. How's your day going?
Cool, thanks. I just managed to get the first version of this Terraform analysis out that I tried to get access to the data for like 5 months or 6.
Wow.
Yeah. But it works now. So cool.
All right. Sorry for being a little bit late. Maria, it looks like you actually have the first item.
Sorry, I wasn't prepared for that. I thought I saw more items.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, that was for Monday's meeting. I moved your issue up to today.
Okay. So I have redesigned the Kubernetes experience, and I wanted maybe to share with the team the redesign, so that we have an early discussion. Also, I wanted to bring up that it's one of our OKRs, and I wanted to ask Victor, because I don't know when the end, or anyone who knows on the call, when the end of the quarter is.
Yeah, it's the next quarter starts on the 1st of May, so end of April.
So 14.1.
We're a month off. We're a month off of what normal quarters are.
Okay. 14.1 would be the beginning. Well, in the middle of 14.1.
In the middle of 14.1, correct. So
Okay.
it does not align. It does not align with yearly quarters and does not align with milestones.
Practical. So we have a milestone and a half to complete basically this issue. And let me also add the shared OKR issue. I saw that we need to complete at least one issue, which is not bad, at least if we complete that. We have selected 4 issues, FYI. So shall I go ahead and share my screen? And can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So the scope of this issue is to improve the UI and UX of the Kubernetes page. After we introduce agents, one part of the UI that doesn't work anymore is when we enter this area for 2 reasons, or 3. One is purely look and feel. It's very different from what we have from the rest of the system. This doesn't affect the UX, but it affects our UI delight. Second reason is we have introductory text here for Kubernetes cluster, but we're in the 2nd level of navigation, so it's not relevant anymore. And the third is that we cannot really go back to the agents, to the previous screen, without hitting the back button or without hitting Kubernetes again to go back to this screen. So this is one of the issues that I would like to fix. The other issue is information. Our wording here is not really good. It's not very clear to the users. One of our internal users commented, I don't know what this is. What do you mean by cluster is connected with certificate or integrate a cluster with certificate? The other thing is that we represent the agents as clusters, which is not true. We have a list of agents, another list of clusters that are managed by an agent. So wording issue is the second area I want to focus on. And the third area is that the user lands on Kubernetes. We have two solutions here, but we don't really have an intro or something that explains to somebody who doesn't really know where they came to or what our solutions are, why they would use the cluster solution, why they would use an agent, what's the first and what's the latter. So these are the three main categories I'm trying to fix with the redesign of this area. And then there is a fourth item I have proposed to fix, which is the docs, but this is outside the scope of this presentation. So I'll take you to Figma because they're in a nicer sequence. So the first thing I did towards fixing the last issue that I mentioned was to add an introduction up here. I'm taking an initial stab with the text, but I will work with Marcia, our copywriter, and Victor. And if anyone has any feedback, obviously it's always welcome. So up here, I'm trying to explain what our two solutions are and what you can do with them. In the next level, I renamed the agents. I introduced agents as the first tab, at least for the premium or gold users, and renamed Kubernetes agents. We can drop Kubernetes and just have agents so that we don't repeat ourselves. So again, copy, I'm just trying my best. And then here I created an intro mentioning, copying from the docs some things, and trying to explain why you would use an agent. Then I introduce one button for installing the GitLab agent, which will lead to the experience for add the agent installation instructions in the UI. So it will probably bring a model up. This is the next piece of work I'm gonna do. And then I'm not sure about this, I would like your feedback, but I have a button to create an agent configuration repository that would take you to the repo with a sub-note that to install an agent, you need to have an agent configuration repository.
I would recommend not to have this button on today because today we have the agent at the project level. So your current project is actually the agent configuration project.
It would take you here basically. It wouldn't do much, but
oh, I see what you mean.
It's more like an informative.
I would say the user wouldn't know what to do with that.
Okay.
Because they wouldn't know that, okay, I have to create a file under .gitlab/agent/agent name/config YAML. Just by that.
So maybe more information rather than an interaction here.
Yeah, I would recommend that.
Sorry, I need to take notes.
It's good.
Okay, so moving on. So this is the experience I haven't worked on yet. It's the next thing I'm going to work, the installation instructions. So moving to the clusters. Again, I try to enhance the text here, but I would like maybe even more enhancement from Marcia. And then the other thing I did here was to split the connect existing cluster and create new cluster experience that we have currently in the form of tabs up here. So I split it into two different buttons. so that it's clear where you're going and what you're doing, and also to remove this weird level of hierarchy we have on the next page. So when you click Connect Existing Cluster, that takes you to the content you had before for existing cluster without the tabs on top. And then if you click on Create New Cluster, which I added as a secondary action because we don't want to promote it either way, takes you to the current screen we have with the 2 cluster type selection with a few visual changes. Just these buttons are wider.
Actually,
And
I would change this. So go back one more, please. It's the 2 actions there. Until now, so what we know is that the create new cluster is a rather limited functionality. You can't customize that cluster, etc., etc. On the other hand, if you have an existing cluster, we want you to use the agent, and you probably want to use the agent. So for this reason, I would rather recommend to have the create new cluster being the primary action and the connect existing one being the secondary one, because it probably fits better our users. Like the advanced users who have their own clusters, we want them to use the agent, and they are probably looking for the agent. Moreover, we have plans to keep this create new cluster function, but move it to Terraform to make it more future-proof and more configurable. So then it actually could become a really valuable feature that could even use the agent, not just the certificate-based integration.
okay, so in the future it could link to a Terraform project or something, but for now we're not doing major functional changes.
Yeah, exactly. Just that I would recommend to have that as the primary, for that reason that
we want to promote existing cluster
Yeah.
integration with the agent.
Yeah.
Okay.
May
So
I
yeah,
ask also,
yeah.
Regarding the tab choices, is like tabs tool that we see that people see it as a or B, like that you're actually taking an option there and deciding if you're going to with tab A or tab B. When I think about tabs, for me, it seems more like something that are unrelated. And yeah, you know what I mean? We are like just showing the first tab, and the user is not aware that there is an alternative way of connecting clusters.
You mean down here or up here? Because for
up
me,
here, up there.
Up here. I agree that, but we don't have a better pattern for. So if it was up to me, I would split these 2 into different navigation items here. But I was advised for now not to do that. That they're both Kubernetes solutions, so they should sit under the same area.
My feeling was that we would either do what you just said, like a split into different things, or have some kind of previous view. I mean, this is too much work. This already looks much better than what we already have. I'm just brainstorming on what could be made better. But I was thinking it would be nice for the user to compare solutions, I think, somehow maybe. So if you could have something like I don't know, when you see the GitLab tier plan, pricing tier plan, and you know what one column does, and the next tier has these other things, and maybe they can compare. I don't know if this is possible.
So more like
maybe cards.
Maybe cards.
Because you can put more copy in cards.
So basically, you would have a single empty state view for the 2. And then you can make this comparison.
Almost similar to the screen to the right, where you had the 2 big buttons. The difference is you'd have copy inside those buttons that explains what they are.
Yeah.
So like John was saying, you could compare.
That was my initial idea as well, but as soon as you have a list, these disappear. So these 2 options. So then
You mean they
Actually,
disappear?
So if you don't have an empty state anymore, would the card sit on top?
Oh,
It would be
right. How do you
selected.
get back to? Yeah, I
that's
guess.
my idea.
I loaded this. This was a pattern I was looking into, like a summary of agent and summary of Kubernetes, but I couldn't figure out what the interaction would be. So would you click here and this would change? Something, I don't know.
My idea would be to just have them on a single page, actually, in 2 tables. And then even the add new button, we can propose the agent first, and it can just have this drop down extra actions to attach something with a certificate or create a new cluster.
The tables, 2 tables in 1 page always pose difficulties. So if we were to split the page horizontally, then we would lose a lot of space for each table, but we wouldn't have the scaling problem. If we split it vertically, then we would have to have sticky tables so that you wouldn't lose a table on the bottom, which means scrolling tables, which is not great UX.
How many clusters would be typically managed? And also how many clusters for these different types would be typically managed?
That's a very good question. I tried to look into this, and usually it's not many. So I would say it's less than 10 clusters.
And if they pick one type, would they ever have the other? It seems like they'd kind of fall into a pattern of, I like this kind and not the other.
That's my expectation, actually. We have a few outliers, though. So we have one German university that has 10,000 clusters attached to GitLab.
Crap.
And those might be in 10,000 different projects. I don't know, but that was fun to find in the data.
Maybe they need to speak with an architect or something, because that sounds crazy. But anyway, that wouldn't fit on any page, so we'd have to deal with pagination regardless of that. But yeah, I can see how. I mean, that's an edge case. It sounds like.
Yeah.
A question. So like if I use the agent to connect to my Kubernetes cluster, I guess like I feel like we're setting up these 2 different paths of managing Kubernetes. But if I use the agent, I logically have a cluster already. Will that show up under this cluster section, or is this only if? Because I feel like then that's automatically confusing, right? Because in my head, I have a Kubernetes cluster and I just connected my agent to it. Why would it not show up under this clusters area?
Well, according to all the feedback I got from engineering, we don't know what the cluster is. We don't know the name. We don't know anything about it.
Right. Now we don't. I'm saying in the future, which is why with this UI, if I have these kind of pairing of like, okay, this is 2 different ways of managing Kubernetes, I feel like it needs to be somehow more segmented. Like, and like I mean, like right now it's like they share the page, but I'm wondering if that makes sense. It's like, would it make more sense to have to go up a level to say, okay, this is this other way of managing it, and here's my clusters. Does that make sense? Maybe I'm not communicating myself very well.
I didn't get it, to be honest.
Okay, no, that's fine. Basically what I'm saying is that if I'm using Kubernetes, I automatically have clusters, right? Like and I can use the agent to manage or to interact with my Kubernetes clusters, right? And so here we're talking about how GitLab is managing it, but logically I have clusters in both cases. So for the user, I think it's going to be, it's like we need a way to segment how GitLab is managing it for the user, because I have clusters in both cases. Does that make sense?
So really the tabs should be agent managed clusters, non-agent managed clusters. That's kind of what you're getting, because either way they're clusters.
Well, yeah. I mean, if I'm using an agent and I see a clusters tab and there's nothing under it, I feel like that'd be confusing for me.
We can say GitLab managed clusters. Well, but until
That's
we
a
have
different thing.
information about your cluster, I would be really reluctant to show any cluster in the listing, because you essentially have an agent and not a cluster, since you don't know anything about the cluster.
I agree with that, and I was even thinking the same. Why don't we forget about this idea of having clusters in GitLab and have only connections to cluster? I think we discussed this before, didn't we?
Yeah.
So under Kubernetes agents, we can even show a list of agents that connects to Kubernetes. And this first description, like when you first get to the page, maybe you don't want to say create your cluster, but rather you want to say connect GitLab to your cluster. And then you have two options. Yeah, we do provision clusters for you if you want. That's the other thing. But we are not tracking your cluster here. We are still tracking how GitLab is configured to connect to your cluster. I think this makes more sense to me.
Yeah. We discussed, actually, this was Maria's original recommendation. And at that time, I was against it, if I remember well. But I just wanted to propose the same.
So is my note correct? Have a single list of connections to clusters, and then we have type of connections.
It is, I think.
Yeah,
What's
I
the
think
second
so.
one? Agent?
And in this page should really tell, I think, how what the users can expect from GitLab in regards to Kubernetes. I think, like the description somehow should say there are many ways that, I don't know, GitLab can connect to your Kubernetes cluster, either through agents, and then we can print somewhere like what the user will get from it. Either you can connect it, sharing your API certificate and so on and so forth, Kubernetes certificate connection, or GitLab can even help you provision a cluster, and if you don't know how to create a cluster yourself, GitLab can provision this cluster and keep the connection through a certificate. I think so. This is very poorly said, but
I will need a lot of help with that copy here.
And also, I don't think you need to necessarily differentiate between the two, because it could just be a table with a column that has an agent column, and it's either got info about the agent or it doesn't. I don't know if you need to necessarily spell out the whole different types, like, because then you're kind of segregating tables again. And I don't know if it sounded like you almost don't need to do that.
I would like to have a type of connection column, so that you could see whether it's certificate, GitLab managed, or agent managed. Well, agent managed, however we might call them.
Thing also to keep in mind is that there are a lot of views beyond these few that would be under the tabs, like the agent details page, which can be confusing because you're going to have like these metrics, like another tab under these tabs. But
very good point, Emily.
And the cluster details page and the other
would those be
stuff.
click-throughs from this table?
Well, wouldn't the tab always stay at the top, or does the tab just disappear as you're clicking?
If we get rid of the tabs, whoa. If we get rid of the tabs, it wouldn't matter. It would become breadcrumbs, I think. Maybe. I think that's the pattern.
So again, we go to the solution of having a list of agents if we want to get to the agent's details page, and a list of clusters that is agent or certificate, which was kind of confusing to me if we have these two lists. Shall I go to the agent page? Just as a reminder how you would get there. I don't think I have a screen of an agent list, but you would come from a list of agents to the specific agent details page.
Or we can change that to list of cluster connections, like Kubernetes connections, and then there's the details.
The agent is an entity though in GitLab. It has a configuration. It has
But what it is for the user, it's a connection to the cluster.
otherwise we would have changed the UX to make it a configuration of the connection to the cluster rather than an agent.
I don't understand what you say. I mean, I would like to propose the user to follow the user's mental model. And for the user, it's not a record in the GitLab database, but it's a connection to the cluster.
Which sits in a separate project and has its own repo and its own configuration. That's why in my mental model, it's a separate standalone entity, but I welcome feedback from the team because I'm not the user.
The truth, I don't really understand your mental model here yet.
Is the runner an entity in GitLab, or is it a connection or the means to do some job? Because for me, our agent is the same as the runner.
Mm-hmm. I would say that
that's such a good point.
When I just use GitLab when I'm developing something or something like that, then the runner doesn't exist for me.
You mean the concept doesn't, like you're not aware of it?
Exactly. I mean, I already set up runners, not just the GitLab shared runners, but like when I use GitLab, I don't care about the runners at all. I care about the pipelines. And the jobs run in the runner, but I don't care about them at all. It's set up by someone else, it's managed by someone else, and I just want my pipelines. Here, I think it's very similar that there are people who set up the runners, there are people who set up the agent and CAS. And then the other who just, is my deployment out? Is it live? So it's very different type of users and different use case around that.
So maybe the maintainer should be able to see a list of agents and the agent details page is accessible to them only, while the clusters connected with an agent is accessible to the developers.
I think developers should also see agents, as they also see runners.
Yeah, it's just that
CI/CD.
Just that you go there much less often. So you go there if there's an error, if something doesn't work, and you start to dig into it, then you go there. But that's not your primary use case with the runner. The primary use case is to have a look at the job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true.
But you have access to both, and it's not that we want to discourage them to go there. It's just not important for them.
We're almost on time, so I want to ask how to proceed here. What recommendations for explorations do you have?
I have one proposal that we learned a few months ago. Let's go back to low fidelity ideation because it's probably much faster. And then the two of us or you alone, we could create 3-4 different variants with whole user flows to see what we mean. And then it might be much clearer for us as well. What do you think about this?
Okay, we hadn't done low fidelity because it was an MVC. So we jumped straight to the solution back when we introduced the list. The thing is, we're a bit tight on time. That's my only concern.
That's not my concern. On the other hand, I tried to add this to the doc that OKRs are a success if we manage to ship 65 to 80% of them or something like that. So we shouldn't aim for 100%. We want to ship these things. If we get to a point where we are already working on them and the quarter ends, I would be totally fine with that.
Okay. Also, in terms of the other experience, for example, install an agent. Will it be connecting new cluster? I mean, if we change the UX, there are many other issues, as Emily mentioned, that are interconnected. So I would appreciate, yeah, I can go back to low fidelity, but we can all give it some thinking about how we want the UX to be here. Because you are the users and just the means to design the experience.
You can also try to take a step back and not even go design and just make sure that the workflows from text-based, click this, go to this, go to this. If I need to go to this, how do I get there? What's that workflow? If I need to go to this, how do I then get there? Because that's what it sort of seemed like Emily was getting at, was paths. You know, if we do this as a table and you click on this, well, then how does that work? So that might be good to step even further back from mockups or even sketches, just to be like, what are the use cases? What are the workflows?
There are two different types of users here. That's the thing. So other people manage the agent and other people want to see the list of clusters potentially. Maybe the same persona, but.
Sorry, I'm going to intervene now because we are over time and I don't want to, I want to respect everyone's time here. So I have to leave anyway. And if I leave and don't give over the host to someone else, then the meeting will be over. So I joined first. And as we are over time, I would recommend to continue this discussion different way.
Sure. Sure. Yeah.
We can have it either async or Maria, if you want, we can set up a call tomorrow on our calendar and we can do it sync as well. And I would like to invite actually all of you here that if you have an idea how you would like to see this, just please sketch it on a piece of paper and send it to us, send it to the configure Slack, and I'm sure that we would be happy to see that. It might be useful for us to give more ideas as well. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, and thanks everyone so far. This great input, great collaboration. I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everyone have a good day.
Bye.